Welcome, everyone. The last lecture tradition started around 2007 with Randy Pausch's book and best-selling book, and it's continued and spread, including at Clarkson, and it's becoming a tradition here. Can everybody hear me okay It's becoming a tradition here to hear from, faculty that have a long history, experience, and have gained some wisdom. It's really a special opportunity. And so, you have are you going to change the? Yes. So it's my privilege, and it's a privilege to all of us to hear the thoughts of a colleague who's had a long and productive and meaningful career. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Professor Charlie Robinson, IEEE Fellow, Founding Director of the Center for Rehabilitation Engineering, Science, and Technology, CREST at Clarkson, and the Herman Shulman Chair Professor and Professor at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He's been a faculty member at Clarkson since 2005. Professor Robinson's accomplishments are substantial and impactful, whether measured in the number of publications, graduate students trained, grants received, number of research and teaching programs initiated, or prestigious awards and recognitions bestowed. Professor Robinson is a truly renowned rehabilitation engineer, science practitioner, a research practitioner, and educator. Among recognitions, he's received the prestigious Emerson Medal from IEEE and the IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Service Award. He is a fellow and millennial medalist of IEEE and a founding fellow of the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering. He served the latter as a chair of their prestigious College of Fellows and its Council of Societies. Robinson was awarded the Purkinje Medal and the Diploma Slalom Honoris Causa from the Czech Association for Medical Sciences, and in 2006, the Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology Society of North America Mentor Award. He's been inducted into UNESCO's World Academy of Biomedical Technology and serves on the Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis Association's National Board of Trustees. We share a few things in common. We're from the same area of the country. We both started our working life delivering newspapers. We both coach soccer, although he at a far higher level than I ever have. We both love project-based learning, getting students to tackle real-world problems and showing what that can achieve. And most importantly, we both value engagement in the community and community service. Professor Robinson uses his mind, his skills, his enthusiasm and energy, and his mastery of teaching and organizational leadership to improve the health and being of his and our community. Welcome the 2022 Clarkson Last Lecturer, Professor Charles Robinson.
Well, thank you, Dr. Langdon. You know, it's hot here. and I don't want to be formal. So, all right. So, I want to talk about the imposter syndrome, and I'll define that. I was a West Virginia coal miner. How did I end up here? And how did I get to go to 38 different countries, 44 states, and the best thing about it, it was other people's money. The only way to travel. And I made many friends throughout the world. Some of them are looking in right now. Hello, everybody. Thank you. But always in the back of my mind, I had this Marlon Brando thought from on the waterfront. He's in the back of the car, and he just threw a fight. I won't throw any fights. I run away. But he just threw a fight. And he said, I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. Instead, I end up in Palookaville. I don't know where Palookaville is. So, anyway, questions in my life and for all of us. In the last lecture, what do I want to be when I grow up? Students, you just ask that question right now. What was I put on earth to do? That's sort of a spiritual question. What is the best that I can be? And how do I measure success in my life? Thanks to everybody. I'm here today because of all your help. Tom for introducing me, Dr. Chris Robinson, no relation but a good guy, for setting this lecture up. My wonderful Clarkson community, especially Miss Polly. My extended family, especially my wife Kathy, and my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and happy day before your 46th birthday, Jack. I'm dyslexic. My students from around the world, mentors from professors, colleagues, and friends all. Let's parse this long lecture. Imposter syndrome and being a contender. Look, I started as a coal miner in my formative years. I did a lot of travel on other people's money, volunteer. Was I lucky? I had lasting friendships, like that Discover card or whatever. It's priceless. And then family, industry, government, academia, and religion. I put together 80 slides. I only have 90 minutes to go through them. All right. You still might get 80 slides, but, well. So what is the imposter syndrome? Somebody who doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And you'll see that through this whole lecture. Yeah, I was pretty competent, but maybe I didn't believe my luck a success. But I really had to work hard because maybe I didn't believe in luck. Was I a contender? So that's this lecture. I feel like Avis. Avis was always number 2. But it ain't bankrupt right now. Hertz is bankrupt. Avis is still going. I made it to the title game. Never won. No Stanley Cup. No Super Bowl. No Olympic medal. Didn't even get the bronze. And I'm very competitive, and I try to be the best that I could be. And sometimes I just worked hard and with some success. So I'm going to talk about 15 forks in the road. And I should have brought a fork from there, because that would have been the 16th. And that's the main subtopic. I was a vagabond, mainly on the East Coast, but you'll see in blue, and when they're blue, it reminds me to say something about it. St. Louis and Ruston, St. Louis, Missouri, and Ruston, Louisiana. The first fork is where I grew up. None of us picked that. None of us picked our family. They picked us. Whatever the situation was. A middle-class neighborhood, a middle-class town in middle America, it was mainly blue-collar, and that's the house I spent about 15 years in. My grandmother was on one side, and it was so hilly that you see that attic there on the back side. If you looked out, you saw the basement of the house across the alley. So what a sled riding thing. Man, you could start way up on the hill, jump off a garage, come across the street, hopefully didn't get no cars are coming, go down and down and down, all the way down to the state route. Well, it didn't go across. And you'll notice that fine picture of me as a kid wearing a bow tie. And there are 2 bow ties here, and you get extra half points. I was born in Wheeling, West Virginia. Try going through immigration and customs. The people look at it and say, West Virginia, well. I had a large extended family on both sides of the river. Important grandmothers, one I had breakfast with every Sunday morning for about 5 years after church. And there were 42 kids, and this is my street. We would start, that would be Trouble Street, that'd be Franklin Street, this would be Guernsey Street. We'd start up there in sled rides, like down and keep going. There are 42 kids within this one block. So we had many teams, many fights, and it was cool. The neat thing, I disappeared after breakfast, came back for lunch, disappeared again. I didn't have helicopter parents. Maybe when I was a parent, I was a helicopter parent, somewhat, but baseball was king. And I have many free dinners in many places, and where we were, I was on 41st Street, and from 44th to 47th was the African-American neighborhood, and 48th was the hospital. And if I caught carp and catfish in the river, I would take it up to Mr. Johnson, give him the fish, and Mrs. Johnson would say, you want to stay for dinner? And she'd call my wife, and I'd stay for dinner. Oh, that's good catfish. This book, I would highly encourage you to get it at Amazon. It's by Kirk Ham, and it actually talks about a summer that I played on my cousin's team over in Wheeling, which is about a 5-mile bike ride. We had pickup games, we had fights. I was left-handed, little league. I was never the best of the horse, but I did okay. In my later years, I played Midwest Championship softball as an outfit. Now you have a choice. Do you go to the local high school, or do you go to the Catholic high school? I went to the Catholic high school. It was 17 parishes coming 20 miles upriver, 20 miles inland, and maybe 8 miles downriver. Served 17 parishes, and I had to learn to get along. I didn't know these people in grade school. There was 150 in my class. I was a poor trombone player. I was a poor French speaker. I was okay in Latin. I was good in math, and I liked biology. But I wasn't a jock in any sport, and I had to be the class clown. And I broke my leg, and I lost my cast broke my ankle, lost my cast after about 3 weeks, but I had a hall pass. Now, if you have a hall pass, you can get out of class early. So I would get out of class early, and then I would run, go get a drink, something else. And not that kind of drink, not yet. But then one of the nuns caught me, and I had, like, what do you call it? You stay after school for 10 weeks. It was amazing. I tried out for the class play. They knew I was a clown. They said, nah, you can have the second, third, fourth. I said, I want the lead part. And I got it. I tried. There were 2 crews. My crew was number 2, and the jocks and everybody else. My friends were out there. They were crew number 1. they screwed that play up so badly. And mine came through. My crew just did it well. I said, yes! All right. So it proved that I could be somebody. I could be the lead. And I tried for the student council president. And again, there were certain factions of faculty that said, no, we don't want this guy. But I had 17 cousins in 15 classrooms. And boy, did we engineer. So I ended up being student council president. And a very practical education, which this is where internships come in. Man, you look at the bottom, I was a paid coal shoveler. So elderly men and women would give me the key to their house at 5 in the morning. I would go in and shovel coal. That was kind of cool. All these things, but I was a union coal miner, and I'm very proud of that. A union electrician, so I didn't really be at the face sometimes. But you know, it's air conditioned all year around, 55 degrees. What more can you ask? And it was dark. I mean, you saw cosmic rays coming across your eyeball. I succeeded even though I wasn't a jock, and I used grit and organizational ability. And the other thing I'm taking away, I really begin to appreciate blue-collar workers. They're smart. And I hope none of you ever look down upon somebody because they didn't go and hawk $60,000 for Clarkson education that you might not pay off till you're 40 unless Biden comes in. But they're making money all along. So please don't look down on them. And we as kids could roam free, and I'd love to see that, but it's hard to do that today. So that's my formation. Now I'm at a stage where, what am I going to do with my life? I've finished. Where do I go? Finished high school. Well, I'm going to go to college, and Case Western Reserve, or Carnegie Mellon, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. They were close. So I visited both. I was accepted there, but I'm going to talk about the Franciscan University of Steubenville because an engineering professor showed up and said, you come here, I'll give you a free tuition. Huh? Well, and my dad was already commuting 30 miles upriver there, and I could keep working at the gas station and study, but this wasn't a sexy college. And if you know it, by the way, Steubenville is Dean Martin's birthplace. Yeah, all right. And at that time, Steubenville was the dirtiest town in the United States. My town, the sun would be shining. I'd drive upriver like it is now, and you'd get maybe 10 miles from Steubenville, and you had to turn the wipers on because it was a black suit, and you couldn't see. Oh, my goodness. And the college was on top of a hill, so it was okay. And for a while, I dated the lady that was over the hill, and I went to her house, and she had a white rug. Huh? How could anybody have a white rug 2 miles from Steubenville? So anyway, it was great. I commuted for 2 years. I was there. There were all 3 engineering years took the same exact class. It was 3 hours at night for 4 nights. And so if you were a young'un, the seniors had to teach you, and if you were a senior, you had to teach the sophomores. I took the honors course for 4 years, and for those coming in on outside, some of you know Dr. Rao, amazing professor, ended up was the Villanova's electrical engineering chair. So I made my coffee so strong that when I lit it with a blowtorch, if it didn't sparkle, I threw it away. And if I put a plastic spoon in it and it didn't start to melt, I threw it away. So I'm having like 6 cups of coffee a day, plus a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper a day. You can see what it did to my throat. I mean, it just wiped it out. I slept. Dr. Rao was so hard of a professor that I would do homework till 3 in the morning, sleep from 3 to 5, get up and drive a school bus, go to morning liberal arts classes, sleep from 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and get up and go eat, and then I did that for 2 years. That's a type A personality. I don't really recommend it. You need your sleep. So what did I learn? Well, I was able to collaborate across age groups, which is great. Liberal arts, engineering, and honors was a great combo. Then I married my high school sweetheart, who always reminded me her IQ was 1 point more than me. All the time. And she was a great cook. And she went down to Louisville for school, and my aunt's sister, who was a nun, was her chief professor. So I would take the car for a 6-hour drive to Louisville to see my aunt. Yeah, right. Yeah. And then I got a speeding ticket coming home, and I forgot to tell my parents about that. And that showed up one time. Anyway, so now I got figured out, like, college degree, good grades. What do I do? I thought about grad school, a number of places, again, Carnegie Mellon, Case Western, Pitt, and maybe the grad school would get me out of the Vietnam draft, because that's pretty. I interviewed for Bell, because I wanted to be an engineer. I like to be an engineer. My degree was in engineering science, by the way. And the recruiter said, no, I'm going to send you to Bell Labs. Huh? Me? To Bell Labs? So that's the first imposter. Completely unexpected. Do I take this? Well, you know, if you're going to get married to your high school sweetheart, having a job is much better than going to grad school. So I took the job. And it wasn't the Bell Labs. Back in those days, most prestigious in the world. And as Miss Piggy would say, they wanted They wanted me. You need to think about it. They paid me a full salary and told me, and my full tuition at Ohio State and mileage, and told me to get lost half time to go get my degree. That was cool. And I had a prestigious title, a member of technical staff, and they taught us a lot in-house. I solved a very major problem for AT&T. They were putting in switching systems at the rate of 1 a week, and a component of that switching system, one of the higher-ups, higher-ups, did a back-of-the-envelope calculation and said, these things will fail in 5 years. Holy moly. Well, I never used a scanning electron microscope before, but I learned to, and I actually measured anionic pitting. It's like looking at the craters of the moon, taking the diameter, seeing if it's a hemispheric or whatever you call non-hemispheric, and a chord, and calculated that the break potential was 10 times less than they said. So the offices would last 50 years. My boss's boss's boss was so happy that he said, you can treat your team, their wives, the central office team where I worked in Columbus, and he and some of the leaders would go with us to dinner. And the sommelier, you know, the wine steward. Wine steward came by and said, Monsieur, what wine would you like? And I said, I don't know what I was in, but let's say Chateau Saint Michel, but not, not 1968. Let's pour. Do you have any 1966s? And he said, Monsieur, we have 4 bottles of 1966 in the basement that were in the wine cellar that we only give to people that request them because they were the absolute best. and it was the best wine. So the next day, same price. So the next day, the big boss, the big boss calls me in. Man, that was a good meal. My wife has got a dinner party for 150 this next weekend. What wine should I serve? I said, holy shit, boss. I pulled that out somewhere. He said, you did so well. Here's $50,000 to spend on Engineering Week celebration. So now, I got to do something. And it was 11 to 12 was a talk, and then a free lunch for everybody. It was about 2,000. And free, I had to pay for that 50,000. And then a talk from 1 to 2 in the afternoon. And I was able to bring in one of the first environmental scientists, Paul Taganides, I think, from Ohio State, and he had a famous quote, which is still with us today: there is no more away. We can't throw things in the river, we can't throw things in the sky, there is no more away. And I was able to bring in J. Allen Hynek of UFO fame because he was at Ohio State. So I got a little bit of crap for that, but I got his book signed, and that's kind of neat. But this was the absolute best Bell Labs benefit. I was working on the REM read switch, which was a component of the ARPANET network, which was the beginning of the internet. And so I got an occupational deferment. I needed that because my draft number was 120, and I'm getting close. And some people that I tell this to said, well, you invented the internet before Al Gore. Yeah, I'll take that. But Bell Labs, you needed a PhD, unless you went into management, and I didn't. And my wife went back and forth with me and got to Ohio State and got her master's in foods and nutrition. And I said in her class, I really like this biology thing. So I thought maybe I'd like to, but really what got me going was a sense of death. The famous docs at Ohio State said, son, you had this incurable disease called scleroderma, which means the elephant skin. And every part of your endoderm, your palms, your lungs, your gut, they become stiff. And I would probably die within 5 years. Well, man, and I'm just feeling crap. Then you pulmonary function tests, everything. And finally, one Saturday, it was so bad, I called the county health department, and I said, can anybody see me? And they said, well, we got this Dr. Barney, and he just came from Argentina. And he's doing all right, but I got to tell you, he's both an MD and a DBL. Am I a horse? But I went to Dr. Barney. He did not use his stethoscope. He did percussion. He said, son, you have walking pneumonia. Bend over. And he gave me 1,000,000 units of penicillin G or B or whatever it was back then. And the next day, I'm cured. And I could run. All those people at Ohio U screwed with my brain. They said, you're going to die. So I said, I'm going back to school to find out how they screwed up. And then also because I was with the telephone system, I learned about communication. I thought I'd learn about how the nervous system communicates, how we reroute something when it's damaged. And students, you've seen these slides, right? Yes, yeah. Come on. Whoop, back up. So I applied all along the East Coast, and I put one inquiry out to Washington University in St. Louis, but I wasn't going to go because it's too far. But my aunt had two children in their families there, and grandkids, and she said, hey, I heard you're going out. I said, oh, okay, I'll take you out. And it was at that time one of the few biomedical engineering programs where MDs really appreciated engineers, and it's still a place where there's such a cross collaboration. So I found, really today, I even think it's the best biomedical engineering program in the world. There was a tough entrance exam into the PhD in electrical computer engineering. It was 8 2-hour tests over 2 days. You students want that? 8 2-hour tests over 2 days. And if you fail twice, you're gone. But you know, I just studied in that summer for the EIT, and I took the EIT on Saturday, I took the PE exam on Sunday, and I took the ethics exam on Sunday night, and I passed it. So I'm not going to study all this stuff. So I took the exam, the third day I was in St. Louis. They said I was crazy. Well, one problem was a huge resistors, capacitors, inductors, thousands of components. And they said, if you throw the switch, what happens over time? Well, we learned, and hopefully many of you learned, that inductors are open when you first throw a switch, and capacitors are dead shorts. So the first thing I did. And then between point AW and AZ was a dead short. A wire, a dead short. Okay? So I said, there's a dead short between AW and AZ, and I walked out in 5 minutes and said, oh shit, I blew this, you know? And the other people are sweating, doing huge matrix. You can't do huge matrix. And that was the answer. So I passed. I was one of 5 of 12 that passed. Whew. So I didn't have to take any more engineering courses. I could take other ones, which I did, but I took a lot of engineering courses. And I wanted to work with the electrical engineering department chair. He was an expert in cochlear neuroscience, but he loved his Lamborghinis, and he wrapped it around the pole at 120 miles an hour. So I had no research lab. I had a small fellowship, but had no research lab. So Dr. Burton, Harold, if you're out there, thank you, because this changed my life. I got in Dr. Burton's lab, and he needed an engineer to build a vibrator so we could study the brain of cats and monkeys and see how tactile sensation was encoded. But I ended up designing for him a 4K by 16 nanosecond scale timer on that classic link. And that computer that you see there has 1K of program memory and 1K of data memory. I did it, folks. I did it. And that tape deck on the top, it was just spinning constantly with this experiment. So one experiment, one tape, put the next tape on, took it off. So that's the classic link computer. Those computers were hand-wired, mainly at, I think, MIT. So this was like model, the 8th one ever built. That's kind of cool, you know? And I was able, since I passed the engineering side, I could take the medical student, neuroscience, and physiology courses. I didn't have any background. I mean, but I got a B+. I loved it. And I took every neuroscience course I could possibly take, either for credit or just sit in. This is something we'd never see today. Everybody had to come on Saturday. Grad students, professors, department chairs, they had to come on Saturday for a 3 to 4 hour seminar on a single topic. That single topic lasted for maybe 8 weeks. So we studied the cerebellum for 8 weeks. We studied schizophrenia for 8 weeks. Wow, that was a heady place to be. But I also took a lot of biomedical engineering and electrical engineering courses. This is the work that it was really groundbreaking. There's a number of areas where tactile sensations work shows up on the cortex. Somatosensory area 1, which is right along here, and 2, which is buried. And nobody could quite figure out what was going on. So we were able to work in awake monkeys where we put a chamber on and studied this, and we mapped 2,000 single units in one monkey, plus many from other countries. And we presented this at the Society for Neuroscience conference in St. Louis, and here's the podium, and I'm very nervous because the guy that I'm going to say it was wrong is Dr. Vernon Mountcastle, who is the Pope of this field. So there's an earthquake in St. Louis, and I'm thinking, I gotta keep this earthquake from shaking. No puddles on the floor, folks, but it was close. So I go through the whole talk, and who pops up? Dr. Mountcastle. Where do I hide? And he said, Dr. Robinson, or wasn't it Mr. Robinson, that was the best example of somatosensory cortical recordings that I've ever seen. Huh? Me? Thank you. But then I was a bona fide neuroscientist. I wasn't an engineer, I was a neuroscientist. And this was a major finding of what was screwing everybody up. And I like that colored picture. That took a lot to do. But there were 2 feet areas that got, 1 foot area that got pushed apart by the representation of the hand. So one group was saying the foot's this way, the other group was saying the foot is that way. And we said, you're both right. That's kind of cool. So St. Louis was great. I had, again, 2 cousins there and their family. My 3rd child was born there in a town called Town and Country. How do you get born in town and country? You're either born in the town or you're born in the country. You're not born in town and country, but that's where the hospital was. My wife, Rosemary, worked as a dietitian, and it was so great. I did about 500 miles of canoeing. You know, you talk about height. We could hike like you do for Adirondacks, but on the weekends we could go canoeing or camping, and I could drive back to my family about 9 hours. And the best thing was getting used to scientific conferences at Bell Labs. I went to a few, but at Washington University, the department chair was the president of the Society for Neuroscience, knew everybody. Everybody was stopping by. I got to meet him. I got to go to the neuroscience meetings. Now think about this. My neuroscience membership number is 3658. Members that are joining now are 365,000 plus. So I was in on the bottom floor. And when you go to the meeting now, there are 2,000 posters up every half day. You can, and the exhibits are two or three football fields long. So, but begin to understand the broad scope of neuroscience research. So now you got another decision. And this is where it gets very interesting. Because I got to sit down for this one. So I had a cousin that spent 9 years in Australia. And I really, really wanted to go to Australia. You know, really, really wanted to. And I got an offer from not just a university, I got it from the whole country of Australia, and only 12 given out, any field, music, whatever, and I was one of the 12. Well, there's a guy from Yale bugging me. He said, I need to know, like yesterday, whether you're coming. And I said, well, I'll let you know on Monday. So I called down to Melbourne on Easter Monday. I didn't get an answer, so I told the other guy, okay, I'll come. This is a major fork. When Tony came here, Tony Collins came here, I could have been going down there. That would have kept the world in balance, right? And by the way, if you're outside, Tony Collins was our president, or is our president. So I called them on Tuesday, and they said, don't you know that Easter Monday is an English holiday? No. So then I'm stuck going to Yale. You know, think about it, stuck going to Yale. That wasn't bad. And I got in the Department of Anesthesiology, which I'm going to tell you, that's sort of interesting. And I was doing human and monkey research in pain and touch, thermal pain and touch. They asked me to be a neuroscience lab instructor. I'm an engineer. You know, how can I teach neuroscience lab? I did. I was able to sit in on anesthesiology Grand Mounds at 6 a.m. Wednesday mornings because they're starting their patients, etc. Nobody missed. And it's a theater like this, 6 a.m. But the coffee was really strong. Not as strong as mine, but it was strong. I could go to resident lectures and pharmacology lectures. And nice thing, I learned 100 ways to kill all of you and 99 ways to bring you back. And I ain't telling you that one because, you know, Kathy, you're safe. That's my wife, Kathy, by the way. And Miss Polly's up there. You're safe, but it might be in a book I write. And then I learned psychophysical recording techniques, and our publications are still considered seminal. And I work with people all over the world. Eric Tutterby, and Roland Johansson from Sweden, Brenda Biglin Ritchie, who passed away, a wonderful lady. She stopped her research career 20 years, had her family, started back up. Within 3 years, she was getting major NIH grants. Now, that's pretty cool. And Johann Thalhammer is an MD, or is a DVM PhD over in Vienna. Great guy. So another challenge, and rather than canoeing, we're now doing 500 miles of hiking. Not like the Appalachian Trail, but part of the Appalachian Trail came to the corner. So the first hike we took was a place called Sleeping Giant. And I would recommend it if you're up by New Haven, it's in Hamden. It's where Quinnipiac College is. So if you go to the game there, make sure you go up. So we went up the Blue Trail. And it's wide, you know, it's maybe a little steep, but not the Blue Trail. And we're following the Blue Trail, and all of a sudden, we're coming down the nose of the Sleeping Giant. Like fall off 1,000 feet on each side with kids. We did it, but then we learned, read the trail guide before you go. We would camp, and Connecticut's a great place to visit. Anybody from Connecticut? Nobody? Anyway, it's worth a visit, all right? I needed a piece for my model train, and I went down to a store's basement, and the guy said, come back next week. Well, don't you want to help me apart? No, come back next week. Okay. So I came back next week and said, well, okay, you're okay, come to my house. Now, imagine a house with a train layout as big as these first 4 steps, and another train layout as big as this, and model trains on the wall, 3 shelves deep. One is orange, one is slightly orange, one is oranger, and there are all these variations that they had. So I discovered trains, and I became a member of the Train Collectors American, still am, and I went to meets, and one of the things you learn, if you ever go to flea markets and you see something you like, you buy it the first time, because it ain't going to be there when you come back. Oh, by the way, I do want to say something about, I got to back up a little bit, about Washington University. This was the journal in which our papers were published, we took up the first 100 pages of the journal. That was something. And it also has, I don't know whether I can do it, it has a 3-page fold-out. Yeah, here it is. It has a 3-page. So I'm flying back from the meeting, and somebody's got this, and I'm thinking he's looking at Playboy, you know, the fold-out Playboy, and here's my monkeys. Boy, that was cool. Thanks, Dr. Burton. And anyway, so I had to point that out. And the other thing, I got introduced to soccer. I was the equipment manager, but the coach was on the Jamaican national team. And yeah, we did well. And one place we went, the wind was strong. And my son at that time was a keeper. And then it was blowing the goals over. Well, the game was called, and we found out later on there was a tornado a quarter of a mile away. Yeah. Whew. All right. The other thing is that Department of Anesthesiology, the chief, the head of the department was Japanese, and he always had 4 visiting Japanese scholars overlapping 2 years. Well, we had to learn to speak Japanese at lunch, and they had to speak English in the lab. So and they adopted us as kindred souls. Wasn't that cool? And I would go to New York City with the department head, and he had a map of all the great sushi places, and we would go one to the other together. And that started my love of sushi. I was so lucky. Think how lucky. I could have been in Melbourne swimming with the sharks, and now I'm eating sushi. So that's pretty cool. I think I turned this thing upside down. Here I go. So here was a major finding. And I thank all the people that send me little notes about, hey, yeah, we found that the fibers that tell us that the water is really hot in your tub, there's a little stinging pain, that they're as sensitive as warm fibers and cool fibers, both from the perception of warmth and cool, psychophysics, and the recording. And Eric Tullebjörk from Sweden, I worked with him, and we were recording from human C fibers, which are like micrometers in diameter. And I told Eric one day, I said, Eric, our data doesn't make any sense. It seems things are happening before you put the electrode. So he's talking in Swedish on the recording, and he said, Charlie, you put the tape on backwards. So once I put it the right way around, we had great results. And we did this at the same time we were doing all this. And when we were doing it in humans, we were correlating the psychophysics with the recording. No one had done that before. That's kind of cool. So when I wrote it up for a British journal. And at the end, in the discussion, well, what's this for? I said, well, we're walking barefoot on the beach, or the cat's walking on the hot tin roof. And the editor made me take that out. Killjoy. Got to come back one other editing thing. Sorry about this. So we wrote this data logger up, and I sent it over again to England, and I said, we have this random access memory, computerized random access memory interval timer. Okay, cram it. I put in parentheses, cram it. And the British editor said, you can't say cram it, but you could say ram it. So it ended up being random access memory interval timer, parens ram it. Who knew? And who knew that I would eventually end up being an editor making these same decisions? Okay. It's halftime. Stand up 1 minute, take a break. It's long. So just stand in place. Yeah, stretch. All right. We're exactly on time. Okay, now let's get going. I don't want to do that. Hey, all that was fun. I didn't have to worry about any of this stuff. I had a great and substantial publication record. By the way, if you're really getting thirsty, I won't mind if you come get a drink, but just don't spill it, okay? There's drinks for afterwards. So I had to get a paying job. What's there fun in that, you know? Yeah, I know. So I'm at the eighth fork. It's that dreaded job search. And I'm listening, and I hear university, academia's calling. Oh, yeah. Now I know what academia is. I said, covered my ears. Academia's calling. So I got an invite a number of places, but I went to the University of Illinois in Chicago, and they had a Taiwanese or Chinese department chair, great guy, ended up teaching for him later on. And he took me to a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, and I loved it, except I got monosodium glutamate poisoning, where I couldn't talk, and I couldn't breathe, and I mean, it's terrible. And, I didn't have a Benadryl, what do you call it, those EpiPens, I didn't have that. So I had to go home that next morning. I started talking. And I got back to Yale, and they said, well, how was the VA interview, Veterans Affairs Hospital interview? Huh? What VA job? So they showed me the little ad. I called the guy up, and he said, well, can you come here tomorrow? I said, no, but I can come here the next day. So I went out there 2 days later, and, was that second job a twisted fate or what? So I ended up being at the Rehab R&D Center at the Hines VA Hospital, and Hines was right next to the Loyola Stritch School of Medicine, and it was an suburb of Chicago. Most of you know about Frank Lloyd Wright and Oak Park, and it was the next one over. And Steve, I think you went to River Forest, which was in there, or from River Forest. So, and this interesting story. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that sometime, right? Yeah, well, I'll tell you now. I was active in the IEEE, and I took my son and a couple of others down to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And Steve was one of them. And I didn't know that. And we're talking in the hall here maybe 2-3 years ago, and we're talking about UIUC or something, and then we're talking about, what was that school? Dominican school where my son went. And Steve says, he went there too. They were classmates. There were many classes together. So what a small world. And I also taught something. So I ended up having a research lab. Now, this is where it gets really good. I needed to start on a Tuesday because I needed to be paid. They wanted me to wait to the end of the pay period, which put me in next year. But I started on a Tuesday. And my boss came in on Wednesday morning, and he said, do you have an equipment list that you would like? And I thought about it. I gave him an equipment list of $300,000. He said, okay, but you need to spend it in 2 weeks. I did. Man, wouldn't you like that to start? That was pretty good. So, and my lab eventually was right on the spinal cord injury service. I made spinal cord injury rounds with the clinicians. I made comments that were taken based on medical needs, which is kind of cool. And I rose to be a GS-14 deputy director of the center. And Loyola Med School, I started out as an adjunct assistant professor, and then based on my publication record, neurology wanted me, neurology, I don't know why. They said, if you come to us, we'll give you an adjunct full professorship. So I was never an associate professor. That's something. Never. And I taught biomedical engineering at UIC. And there's a wide range of funding. I kept working with Dr. Burton. I looked at the failure of people with spinal cord injury to urinate and defecate, and we found out the locks don't work. But my real good thing was spasticity and spinal cord injury, functional muscular stimulation. It got me to go to Europe, the beautiful city of Dubrovnik and Ljubljana, and things like that. So this is neurology grand rounds. And grand rounds is just like this. There's a subject down here, there's a medical doctor presenting, or that subject, and they were presenting somebody that worked in the VA, and that person had been kicked in the side of the head by their horse, and they'd been rendered deafblind. So both eyes were out. She couldn't hear. They had to finger spell to her. She was not a candidate for a cochlear implant, but her town raised $50,000, and they put the cochlear implant in, and she was able to communicate. So she's on stage, they're turning the mic on, the implant on, she's talking to us, and it was amazing. I'm like, wow. So she leaves, and the otolaryngology surgeon, I didn't really like him, He was a pompous east end of a westbound donkey with flaming, eviscerated hemorrhoids. I won't tell you what that translates to, but you get the idea. All right. So he got up and said, I'm so good. I took this 2-centimeter long piece of al dente spaghetti, and it's a millimeter wide, and I put it in the right place. And the audiologist said, oh, we tuned it up just perfectly. I'm pissed. I probably shouldn't have done it. But I jumped up, and I said, Mr. Surgeon, you're nothing but a plumber. Now, there's all these doctors and nurses and audiologists. I said, you audiologists are nothing but dial tuners. I think I just lost my jaw. Well, the department chair was like 6'13", if you'll get my drift. And he got up and said, oh man, I'm done. He said, Dr. Robinson's absolutely correct. We don't give any say about what engineers have done for us. If it wasn't them, we couldn't put it in. That's what I said. The engineers did this. You guys are just plumbers and tuners. Well, I got asked from then on to be on every complex neurology case that they had. Was that cool? And then this society, I went to the Society of Neuroscience, and I'm passing a booth, and they have a framed paper with arrows. It says, this proves the medical benefit of marijuana. Well, shit, that's my paper. That was my paper. Because when we were studying spasticity, some of the veterans that I was studying with spinal cord injury, on Monday and Tuesday, their legs were like this, and on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, they were like this. So I had to take one off campus, because I can't ask them on campus. So the streets there, went across the street. I said, what are you doing? They said, we're smoking marijuana. So I was able to get a grant and get THC extract and give. So isn't that something? And so they wanted to make me a fellow of the Hemp Society. Right now, I wish I had that. But I was a Fed back then, and that would not look good. Now, the other thing about going to conferences, we had a center booth always at the Rehab Engineering Society of North America. And one guy came around that was also interested in rehab, but was from the IEEE Engineering, Medicine, and Biology Society. And I gave him my card. I said, anything you want me to do, I'd be glad to help. So about 2 weeks later, he called me up. He said, I've been tasked with writing a position paper for the National Academy of Science and Engineering, Science and National Academy of Engineering, about the future of biomedical engineering, and I'd like you to write the section on rehab engineering. Me? Well, I did it, and it got published, and then he appointed, he said, you did a good job. So he appointed me chair of the 86 EMBS conference in Fort Worth. I'll tell you about that. And that started me with a 30-year career with IEEE. So these were the forks. And I'm encouraging all of you students to get involved with your technical societies. Resident Rehabilitation Engineering Society in North America, IEEE Engineering Medicine Biology Society. I never did much for Society for Neuroscience, but volunteering was the best thing I ever did. And I learned people management skills, organizational leadership, and best of all, I could travel on their money. OPM. It is not opium, don't get me wrong. You know, it's 3 separate letters. All right. Anyway, a little bit, Swami, it was a great man, and he helped George Kondrasky and me organize the Fort Worth conference, and he passed away. And then I decided, and Swami helped me, that this was a little parochial conference before Swami George and I got to it, and we changed it from 400 to 720, and we got NIH and NSF funding to put on a workshop on the special symposium on critical and emerging issues of biomedical engineering. So I had about $50,000 to do that, and I could bring people from all over the world. I brought 40 people in. A lot came from France, and because they came from France, and 3 or 4 years later, I said, we need to have a meeting in Paris. So I got to go to Paris about 6 times in setting up this meeting, and I gave one of the keynote addresses on Francais, très mal, but you know, I did it. It wasn't the best. I served as IEEE membership development chair. I have a famous equation, 51,000 equals 0. We were gaining 51,000 members a year, and we were losing 51,000. That ain't sustainable, folks. So we developed ways, I developed a way that we could gain 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% in succeeding years, and worked. So they gave me the Emerson Award for that and other things. I also negotiated for EMBS to be a member of the worldwide group, and I was in Japan, and they were the ones that were the main stumbling block, and they told me to come to a dinner. So I gave the card to the taxi driver, and he drove me up, and he said 3, and it was a dirt street, hill, 3, and there was no door, it was just a drape. So I went in, and there was a couple people that I recognized. I recognized the head honcho, and there was a couple from the United States. And they said, you know, you have to figure out how far to bow. So they knew that. So immediately they said, you are sitting next to the head guy. And the head guy has his back to the Shinto shrine. Okay? So I know that I bow to him, lower than him, but everybody else has to bow lower than me. That's pretty cool. So the main course, the main soup course was fisheye soup. How many eyes does a fish have? He gets one, and I get one. Now, I'm left-handed. I can't use my left hand for my chopsticks because that's for other parts of the body. So I got to do right-handed chopsticks and get this slimy sucker in my mouth, which I did because I played chopsticks as a kid. So I got him in there, everybody claps. And they said, okay, we'll do what you want us to do. Just because I could eat fish eyes. That's kind of cool. Wasn't bad. I was the founding editor of the Rehab Engineering, IEEE Transactional Rehab Engineering, and I was asked to put together, I sort of said, you're putting on a meeting down in Mensadville about brain-computer interfacing. I'll take all the good papers. So this is all the papers on that session. And I got to be on the papers, not on here, but it's the next one where it defined the term brain-computer interfacing. And it's still cited maybe 50 times a year, which is great when I have to tell my dean and the provost my citation record. And the people, thank you all, the people from the Albany NIH Center for National Center for Adaptive Neurotechnology, they were the group that set this up, and they asked me for the last 15 years to be on their scientific advisory board. Me? Yeah, okay, thank you, and I do contribute. The other thing in Chicago, I learned to be a soccer coach. I moved around so much that my watch said I achieved my stand goal. All right. I coached my kids' teams, my oldest son and my two daughters, and was sort of helping with the next son down. Fifth grade coach, and I always believed that if you miss a goal, you just miss a goal. And the kids really tried, and I said, it's like playing basketball without hands. And they got that really cool, all right? You can have pick-up rolls, you can do everything else. And if they missed the goal, I'd say that's just unlucky. They still ask my daughter, how's unlucky Chucky doing? Oh my goodness, come on. And I was able to be a select assistant coach, and we went all over the Midwest. I took the team. Now these are mainly urban and inner city Chicago players. Sparta was a Czech club. And I remember one time we were near Toledo, and I said, I'll take you for local food. And they thought we'd go to McDonald's. I took them to a real country restaurant, Country Fried Chicken. You know, wow, what's this stuff? I didn't believe these hicks and the sticks could cook. Come on, guys, give me a break. And I got the very high-level soccer ref training and high-level coaching training. I was the only the only grade school coach in a class of college coaches. That was pretty cool. And it required I could do 8-minute miles. Now I can do 16-minute miles, but that's the way it goes. And then, but you're in there and you've done this, and I said, was the grass greener? I loved what I was doing. I'd love to be with the patients. I'd love to be able to go out and camp and canoe and do all this stuff. Why move? And then, so that's a great question. What would happen? Somebody who knew me in this residence said, we want you to come to Pitt to be a department chair. And the neat thing is I could keep my VA job and my equipment would move. So I became the founding chair of the University of Pittsburgh Department of Rehab Science and Technology. It is now not because I did it, but because of people that I hired and continued what I started. Now the leading rehab technology department in the entire world. So thanks to Dr. Cooper and others, they've done that. The thing was we could collaborate with the engineering school, with the medical school, which was right next door. And many undergrads and grads and research were in my VA lab. I had a major NSF training grant. And for the engineering school, I developed and taught their first bioengineering lab, and I helped the bioengineering program get a $10 million Whitaker grant to start the BME, the official bioengineering department at Pitt. So this is, I still volunteer for societies. There's another one, it's all alphabet soup, Biomedical Engineering Society. And then there was a group that wanted to do something because they didn't like IEEE MBS. They're chemies, they don't like, although many non-electrical engineers were in IEEE MBS, they just didn't like that idea. And there was something before BMBS, and it wasn't working well. So they said, we want to have another society of biomedical engineers. And I said, OMDB. Anybody know what that means? OMDB? Anybody? Over my dead body. Yeah, no, you're not going to do it because we're a member of, EMBS is a member association. However, I'm going to make a proposal. If you want to take the top 800 people in industry, academia, and government and call them fellows, and we have a college of fellows, I'm all for it. And if you want to then get all the societies, and there are many that have biomedical engineering, chemie, MECI, so on and so forth, and we'll have a society, council of societies, and we'll have an academic council, which now is 120 places in the United States that offer biomedical engineering, and we'll have an industrial council. And they accepted that. They accepted my idea. It was kind of cool. And so I was selected as a founding fellow. It's very prestigious to be chair of the College of Fellows because they're Lasker Prize winners, they're almost Nobel Prize winners. They elected me. Me. Isn't that something? The Council of Society chair, that was, somebody had to do it, but boy, being elected chair of the College of Fellows was a singular honor. And so thanks anybody who did that. Maybe thanks. The thing about OPM, I got to travel around the world for IEEE. I got to travel around Pacific. There's a trick. If you keep going in the same direction, you can have the same, you can have as many stops as you went. So United had, if you keep going around the world, it's one price, so it wasn't bad. So once I went around the world, and once I went around the Pacific. So Japan, Hong Kong, New Zealand, isn't this cool? So, and then as a president of EMBS, I spent 24 days with my wife in Eastern and Central Europe. We would travel by train, sleeper train. We would get up, I'd go to meetings, and somebody would take my wife touring. And we were in Vienna, and that Swami I mentioned, not Vienna, we were in Budapest. Before that, my wife Rosemary and I were in Romania 3 months after the fall of Ceausescu. They had electricity then 4 hours a day. When Ceausescu was in there, it was 2 hours a day. So anyway, we're coming out of Budapest, and Swami's on the train, he has a beer, and he goes to sleep, and the train stops. Swami wakes up, the train starts. He wants another beer, takes that beer, goes to sleep, yep, the train stops. So he wakes up, finally we get to Vienna and through and into the Czech Republic, and it was good. So we're flying home, and my wife Rosemary's here, and I'm on the owl, and Swami's here. Swami's got his beer, and he's starting to go to sleep. I said, Swami, you're not sleeping on this plane. I don't want him to stop, okay? And all over the places. And Kathy, I said, Kathy, I got a meeting in Germany. I'd like you to go over with me. She said, oh, fine. So I went to the meeting, but I'm also touring in Munich, and her son calls her and says, Mom, where are you? And she said, Germany. He said, what are you doing in Albany? He said, no, Germany. Oh, what are you doing in Germany? That was another story. So because I had some stature, I was invited to the Hotel de Ville, the mayor's house, for a big reception. So, it's like my brother-in-law's in tux, and that's what you had to be. You were there. So we were there, and I got introduced to the mayor. I looked at my watch and said, come on, Kathy, we got to go. So we walked out in the street and went up courtyard. I said, we got to sit here for a minute. Well, this armored black car came up, and 3 people got out, each packing, you could tell. And they got around another fellow who got out, and they said, where are we going to put her? And Kathy thinks the trunk. She didn't know where they're going to. And they said, well, we're going to put her between us. So there's this guy, there's the 3 guards, there's this guy, there's Kathy, and there's me. And we opened the door, and there's all these flash bulbs, and they pushed and press. We went up around the side. We sat down. The chairs were almost as tall as I. They're huge back chairs. There was me, my wife, and the Duchess of Romania next to her. And they provided an interpreter for her. Well, after it was over, Kathy took me by the ear in the back room and said, what the hell was that? I said, well, that was the governor of Bavaria. I said, the rest of it, I can't tell you. I'd have to kill you. No, that old story. So, volunteer. I went to a rehab meeting in Czechoslovakia, and I was literally this far from Pope Benedict as a UNESCO delegate to the Vatican. So in Pittsburgh, it was a great place, except we didn't have any room for research. We only had me as a department chair in one building, and everybody else either in the VA or in another research park. So we were divided, and we got a new building, but the dean said, no, you have to stay at the VA. Well, I'm department chair. I mean, that didn't seem right. And somebody said to one of the students that they didn't like that she was volunteering, don't do that. I said, no. There's a place on the team for everybody. Well, she's now written 3 books. In her first book, that was one of her citations. There's a place on the team for everybody. And then another faculty came to me and said, I don't want to teach. I have no time for students. I just want to do my research. This is university. You got to teach. So I sort of had to get out of there. But I was promoted to a GS-15 rehab career scientist. And somebody told me that's equivalent to a brigadier general. I said, yes, sir. Anyway, so now I want to really do biomedical engineering. And again, from RESNA and Biomedical Engineering Society, they said, we'd like you to come to Louisiana Tech. And it's one of the first biomedical engineering programs in the country. My wife's parents and my parents had passed away, and we could move. But the daughter was still, she was a junior in high school, and she really liked her high school, and she was good in soccer. That year in soccer, as a goalkeeper, she let in 1 goal. And that was an own goal. That's pretty good. She was good. Hi, Megan. And so the daughter came down with me for the spring semester, played soccer there. They had superb recruitment techniques at Louisiana Tech. My wife was hired as professor. But Megan, it's the senior year, and Megan said, I'm going back to Pittsburgh for my senior year. And I said, Megan, I'm going to miss your prom if you do that. And she said, Dad, if I stay here, you're going to miss my prom. Okay. So she went back. She did well. I was overseeing vocational rehab throughout the state of Louisiana. I was again, a research lab was out to VA. I was an adjunct professor of orthopedic surgery, and I hired 2 great faculty. Well, the grant I got, one of the faculty just sent me a note. He said, do you remember? And he had this very elegant idea, which he's patented a couple of times, of making tricentric electrodes that automatically could calculate the Laplacian of the signal. Now, some of you who know about fields and waves know about Laplacians. It's like the second derivative, kind of cool. But he's very excited about this, and he showed the stuff to me. And I walked in and I said, excuse me, I said, you know, Walt, that's all artifact. Well, you don't like to kill, you know, your enthusiasm. But Walt said, yeah, you're right. And then he developed better filters. And he went on to get many grants and many patents. So that's what a mentor is supposed to do. I had a slip, fall, step 'em lab. And that actually means something, but I won't go into it. But I did a lot of high-level soccer refereeing down in New Orleans, a 5.5-hour drive, leave at 4 in the morning, do an 11 o'clock and a 1 o'clock game in the Hispanic League. And they used to call me El Rapido because at 50 I could run as fast or faster than them. If I'd have been smart, I would have said, no, Senior Rapido. And if they were really smart, they said Don Rapido. But they never went there. But, you know, sometimes they would curse and swear in Spanish. And I could go, and I'll use the one that is easy. Catalboco, you know, shut your mouth. But I knew the rest of them that I could just go to them and say, okay. So, and now I did the Olympic development tryouts. I did Southern regionals, taught many BME courses. But again, you have to understand the Southern mentality to succeed, and I didn't. So was it me? Did I screw up? Almost done. So now I'm a failure as department chair. I'm a failure as a center director, and that led me to seriously question my ability. But I love to teach. And I actually got the resident, as Tom said, the resident Mentor of the Year award, which was kind of cool, you know. Somebody thought me to do something. Now we come here. Dr. Shuckers. I don't know whether to thank you or yes, I thank you. So I knew Dr. Shuckers through the IEEE MBS. We were on the administrative committee. And she called me and said, Charlie, would you like to come to Potsdam? I said, yes, I'd love to go to Germany. No, this is Potsdam, New York. Well, it was before Google Maps, but whatever I had on the computer, I blew it up 17 times, and I finally found Potsdam. So in November of '04, I rented a car at Ottawa, and I drove down, and it's the gloaming. It's towards the night, and it's a little bit foggy, and all the white birch trees are dead. I mean, I'm looking for the headless horseman. Oh, geez, Louise. But I got such a warm reception here, and I stayed. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, others. You know, I helped develop our biomedical engineering minors. I taught many core biomedical engineering courses and neuroengineering and sometimes electrical engineering. And I wrote a number of papers about teaching innovations and ethics. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. I got an NIH grant, and I actually got one of the Bible supplement grants, which is kind of cool. And I got grants to help those with disability to keep gainfully employed. Had a Goldwater fellow in my lab. So it was really good. Clarkson's a great school, lessons learned. This is one of the few places in the country, excluding places like Washington University in St. Louis, where they encourage cross collaboration. But for me, it was very, very hard to balance research, teaching, directing a center, volunteering, family, refereeing, fighting with the dog. No, I didn't have a dog. But life's balance sometimes gets out of whack. I think I only succeeded in teaching well, else I really, really, really could have been a contender. And I did just win the ASWE St. Lawrence Section Outstanding Teacher Award. And that section goes from the tip of Quebec, Ontario, over to Toronto, and down to maybe whatever, Interstate 80. So it's pretty cool. And that puts me in line for the national award. Don't know where I'll get it. 13th Fork, my wife Rosemary developed Lou Gehrig's disease around her 60th birthday. She was a great singer. At 2.5 octave range, I became her main caregiver. Many others helped. I was elected trustee of the National ALS Association. In our last 2.5 years, we traveled 20,000 miles to all four coasts using more and more assistive technology. This down here at the corner, dancing. How do you dance with somebody in a wheelchair? You get behind them, and this is my daughter Megan's wedding. You get behind them and you boogie. And she was totally paralyzed, but she cracked a smile. And everybody in the room was crying. And the groom didn't want to dance with her. That marriage didn't last long. And then family was very important. And there's the wedding, and there's the funeral. And it was a great, great family. 14th Fork is Miss Kathy and ministry class, and I took a 2-year commissioned lay minister training. It was in the church 2 miles from me, and Dan Brown, wherever his books were, Angels and Demons, I wanted to see if he was right. I wanted to study, was he right or not? I don't know. And I met Kathy in class, and we got engaged, and Jay saw the ring in Tractor Supply and called Johnny over, and John shook my hand and ran out the door. And the next day they called it Familia Consigliere. Like the Lorcan Jorda, the Familia Consigliere. You don't want to be, I came this close to getting cement boots in the St. Lawrence River. And she said, but I told my mom. Yeah, you did. But so she's a great lady. I learned a lot from her. And the 15th Fork, and this is why we come again, almost exactly on time, retirement. I'm going to write novels. I wrote this novel. It's 74,000 words. It's out for review. A very prestigious jury prize. And it's about electric cars. And the owner of the electric car company is trying to sterilize all the liberals by focused electric field EM waves to the driver's seat. Yeah, that's kind of cool. So there's a mystery of how this is happening. And I also like model trains. That's in my basement, I know. And I like to travel. And I will continue to volunteer. I'm a volunteer with the Catholic Knights of Columbus. It's 2 million people worldwide and about 85,000 here in the state. I was state officer for 4 years. And I have a golf outing for ALS coming up in August. And I think some of you end up playing, which is good. And so I'm going to send up it says go achieve. My watch just said go achieve. That means I'm done. All right. I'm a jack of all trades. Grants across 11 different areas. But I wasn't a master of any. Once I solved a research problem, I understood it. I went on to another one. I was not good at academic leadership. I hate academic politics. I love being in the VA full-time and interacting with the patients. I excelled at volunteer leadership and innovation. And my kids need to judge me as a father. I did travel a lot, but I also coached them. And with a poem from Robert Frost. I'm not going to read it all. 2 words, 2 roads diverge to Yellowwood, and I'm sorry I couldn't travel both. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I end by saying, I did take the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Was I lucky? Did divine guidance help? Was I an imposter? Was I true grit? Feedback is welcome. It's easy. Robinson at Clarkson.edu. I would welcome your thoughts. And it's the end of that road and the beginning of another one. And right exactly on time. Thank you all. Whew. And thanks to the crew that I didn't get a chance to use my yellow and red cards, but I was coming up to the time where it was like 1 minute to go, and at 5:30. Anyway, there's drinks down here, water and soda, and they don't have half cans. You know what the half cans are called? Mini sodas. Mini sodas, like the state. Anyway, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.